If you're new with us, we've been going through the book of Exodus here at Gospel Life on Sundays. And today in the book of Exodus, we come to the Ten Commandments. Ten Commandments. Now, you probably know that over the last 10 years or so, the Ten Commandments have garnered some controversy in the public square. And so right here in Alabama in 2018, there was a big feud in our state. Do you remember that? There was a huge controversy on whether or not this 5,200-pound stone replica of the Ten Commandments could be displayed on public grounds. Now, we heard so many Christian leaders around the country chime in on this. I mean, people from coast to coast were commenting on this issue here in Alabama. And most of the Christian leaders that we heard took a very strong stand for the public display of the Ten Commandments. Now, on the flip side of that, we recently heard a few years ago a megachurch, very famous megachurch pastor say that in order for us to reach the modern skeptic, the Christian church in America needs to completely unhitch itself from the Old Testament, including the Ten Commandments. Okay, so who's right? Who's right? Is it the monument builders who place a very high emphasis on the value of the Ten Commandments to bring about change in society? Or are the unhitchers right, who say it's time to unhitch ourselves from the Ten Commandments in the Old Testament and just focus exclusively on the New Testament? Who's right? My answer is neither. Neither one are right. I think they're both wrong, actually. Both the monument builders and the unhitchers are wrong. Let me show you why. So let's turn now to Exodus chapter 20, and we'll look at verses 1 through 17 together. If you don't have a Bible with you, it's okay. The verses will be on the screen behind me. Exodus 20, we're going to look at verses 1 through 17 together. Exodus 20, verse 1. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. This is God's word. Okay, so we're going to see today that God has two very different words to speak to humanity. And these two different words, they run throughout the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. And in fact, one commentator says that every verse that you read in the Bible is either one word or the other. So God is continuously back and forth speaking two different words. These two words serve two different purposes, and as such, we need to keep them separate, which is very difficult to do. As we'll see later, the modern church has kind of smashed these two words together and made a mess of them. And so what we're going to try to do today is untangle the mess and look at the two words separately like they're supposed to be looked at. Okay? So the first word we'll look at that God has to speak to us is the law, which is number 1 in your outline. The law. And this is found in verses 3 through 17 that we just read. The law is one word from the Lord that he gives to humanity. Now, some of you know that I hurt my back pretty badly last week. Okay? Hurt my back pretty bad. Now, how did I do that? How did I hurt myself? Well, in the back of the church, you probably know, we have these tall bistro table chairs, okay? Some folks are sitting in them right now. So we got these tall chairs. And, those chairs are pretty good for sitting in. I mean, they're not great, but they're pretty good. Not super comfortable, but they're okay. They're okay. But you know what I found out? I found out that those chairs are terrible ladders. Terrible. Really bad. Okay, so chairs, good. Good chairs. As ladders, bad. Really bad. See, I found out the hard way that those chairs are too narrow and flimsy to be used as ladders. See, I had to string up some lights and so forth, and so I just thought, hey, I'm not going to bother getting the ladder out. I got these chairs. They're high enough, no problem. So I put the chair up, I jumped up in the chair, and before I knew it, the chair flew out from underneath me, and Humpty Dumpty came tumbling down. What did I do there? What I did is I used something that's not designed to be a ladder as a ladder. And I can tell you from experience, it's not good for your health to do that. It's not good for your health. Likewise, one of the most common ways we misuse the law is when we use it as a ladder. When we try to use the commandments as a way to climb up, up, up into God's favor. Each act of obedience to the law is just another rung up the ladder, getting you closer and closer to God and farther up than those lazy churchgoers sitting next to you. Many, many Christians view the law this way. I would say the vast majority view the law this way. Non-Christians also view the law this way. I know personally, when I was a skeptic, this is exactly how I viewed the law. I thought Christianity in general and the Ten Commandments specifically was this moral ladder climbing system, right? And so I'm not alone. Most skeptics that I speak to believe exactly the same thing about Christianity. The Ten Commandments were given to us as a ladder. And most Christians I talk to think the Ten Commandments are given to us as a ladder. In fact, to most Christians, the Christian life is nothing more than religious ladder climbing. That's what it is. In order to grow in the faith or to be a good Christian, you just got to climb, climb, climb. Climb the ladder, climb the ladder, climb the ladder. This kind of thinking has spread like a plague among American churches and beyond. And hey, like I said, I used to be one of those people. I was caught with the plague too, okay? I thought the same thing. All right, and I can tell you from experience, it's not good for your health to think that way about the Ten Commandments. And so is that you this morning? Are you a religious ladder climber? Well, you may not think that you are, but let me share with you 3 symptoms of ladder climbing disease. Ladder climbing disease. Symptom number 1. You might be a ladder climber if you find it difficult to understand why bad things happen to good people, especially to yourself. That's symptom number 1. Let me explain further. So imagine someone reading that third command, the third commandment, and saying to themselves, you know what? I never use the Lord's name in vain. Nope. I always say, doggone it. Or, gosh dang it. That's me. That's what I say. Hey, you know what? I think I've moved a couple rungs up the ladder. Look at me. I'm getting high up there now. I'm not like all those other foul-mouthed people I go to church with. I've got a clean mouth. I'm going up, 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 up the ladder. Look at me go. But then, let's say that this person gets into a car accident, or they come down with some terrible sickness, or they get laid off at work, or their wife hands them divorce papers, etc., etc. What will they say then? Here's what they'll say to God. They'll say, now wait just a minute. God, how could this happen to me? I have so faithfully said, doggone it. This isn't fair. Look how high up the ladder I am. You see, what's lying underneath all those thoughts is the disease, the plague of ladder climbing. It's a plague. That person thinks that because they've climbed so high up the ladder, that God owes them. He owes them one. God owes them His favor. God owes them His blessing. God owes them a happy marriage. God owes them a good job. God owes them a big house. God owes them safety and comfort. God owes them a happy and peaceful life. That's symptom number one. Symptom number two, you might be a ladder climber if you respond to your own sin or disobedience of one command by doubling down on other commands. See? You respond to your own disobedience of one command by doubling down on other commands that you're pretty good at. Let me give you some examples. So this person says to themselves, you know what? I did drink too much the other night. I did. In fact, I tend to drink too much a lot of nights. Yeah. But I'll say this for myself. I've never cheated on my wife. Never, not once. Look at me. I'm a pretty good fella. I drink, I get you. I drink too much. But, man, am I a good husband. Man, look at me go. Look how high up the ladder I am. That, friends, is a symptom of ladder climbing disease. This is someone who looks at the law as a scale system. See? I think the law is a scale system. And they say, as long as my good deeds outweigh my bad ones, then I'm good. Me and God are buddies then. See, I got some bad deeds over here, I admit. I got some good ones, but boy, look at these good ones. Man, me and God are good. He's happy with me. Me and God are besties, as my daughters would say. Besties. Look at all these good things I do. Okay, symptom number three. Number three, you might be a ladder climber if you are filled with righteous indignation when you see someone else not being as obedient to the law as you. Let me give you an example. This person says to themselves, they say, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I just don't understand how some people can be like that. How someone could steal from their own family members to feed their drug habit. Shame. Such a shame. You see, this person uses the law to spot the splinter in their neighbor's eye, while failing to use it to spot the log in their own eye. And what all these symptoms have in common is a foundational assumption that the law is given like a rubric to help you pass a test. Didn't you love those in school? Like when the teacher kind of gives you the rubric beforehand, and you're like, all right, all I got to do is just work super hard on this rubric, check all the boxes, study, and then when the test comes, I'm good. Just got to check enough boxes, And so that's how it works in most Christians' lives. Hey, if I just check enough boxes, if I just put enough good works on the scale, if I just put a big enough check in the offering plate, If I just climb high enough up the ladder, then I can have spiritual success. I can be what's called a good Christian. That's all I got to do. Just keep working. Keep trying, working my way up the ladder. But you know what? When we treat the law as a ladder, do you know what we're really doing? We're ironically breaking the first command. We're breaking the first command. We're making the 10 Commandments an idol. That's what we're doing. We're just using the 10 Commandments to force God to give us what we want, which is spiritual success or a happy and peaceful life, etc., etc. For us, the 10 Commandments are just a means to an end, our end. They're our way of fixing our problems. They're our way of forcing God's hand. And then the 10 Commandments become an idol. But here's the thing. Like those high-top chairs in the back, the 10 Commandments make a terrible ladder. Terrible ladder. And the Commandments make a terrible ladder because God Himself makes it perfectly clear throughout the Scriptures that His favor cannot be earned. His love and acceptance and forgiveness cannot be earned. Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. We see this, we've already seen this very clearly in the Exodus narrative. If you've been with us for more than a few weeks, you've seen that clearly. And God makes this point very, very clear all the way through the Old Testament and all the way through the New Testament. So, the obvious question now is this. If the commandments aren't a ladder, what are they? What are they? Why did God give them? What are they designed to do? Well, the Apostle Paul answers that for us. Okay? So he says that the law is not a ladder, it's a mirror. It's a mirror. Paul writes this in Romans 3:20. He says, "No one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law." I'll read it again. No one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin. Romans 3:20. And there are many other places Paul says something similar, but I like Romans 3:20. It's just explicit and straight to the point. Romans 3:20. So, the law is not a ladder. It's a mirror. Or maybe you could think of it as a spotlight, like a bright white spotlight that serves to reveal with terrifying clarity just how incredibly sinful we really are. So when Yahweh holds up the 10 Commandments, He's saying, here, in plain sight, are all the things you must do and yet fail to do. Okay? That's what He's saying. These are the things you must do, and these are the same things that you do not do. You fail to do them. Now, why does God do this? Is He just mean? Like, does He just want to ruin your day? Does He want to make you depressed? Well, no. No. So you could think of the law as a mirror for sure, but you can also think of it as kind of like an x-ray machine, showing all the places we are broken inside. I'm very familiar with x-ray machines thanks to those chairs in the back this week. I got to be put through an x-ray machine just this week. How fun. And so that was actually the first thing that they did. When I went to the hospital, I only had to wait 5 hours in the waiting room. And then they rolled me back there in a wheelchair. And they said, "Mr. Dotson, we got to take a look at your back, so let's do an x-ray." And so that's what they did. It's the first thing we did. Took me back there, went through the x-ray. Now, why did they do that? Why didn't they just give me the medicine? Why didn't they just give me the treatment? It would have been a lot quicker, a lot less expensive. Why? Because they didn't know what was wrong. They didn't know what I had done to myself. So they had to put me through the x-ray to find out. See, the x-ray revealed what was wrong. And thankfully, there were only two things that were broken. Really? Well, yeah. Two things were broken. I had a small muscle tear in my lower back and my pride. My pride was shot after that. But that was all. Luckily, they did no major structural damage to any bones or anything. But it did reveal muscle damage, and so essentially, then they were able to they diagnosed me through the x-ray, and then they said, here you go, Mr. Dotson. It's just pain management from here on out. Here's some pills, and you'll be good to go in a few weeks. And so that's what they did, right? Do you not see that God is doing exactly the same thing with the Ten Commandments? He's doing exactly the same thing. You see, if you think of the law as an x-ray, which it is, it's wonderful. This is a great thing. There's no reason to fear the law. This is wonderful. The law is a beautiful thing. It is a very powerful and effective x-ray. And we'll see just how powerful and effective in the coming weeks, because God ain't done yet with the commandments, if you didn't know. God's going to drill down even deeper into these commandments. And we'll see in the coming weeks how the law reveals even our teeniest and tiniest sins and rebellion. So this is awesome. This is a tremendous way for us to see how sinful that we are. But with that said, like an x-ray, the law doesn't heal us. Okay? It does not heal us. It only reveals our brokenness. And the problem comes is when we use the law as a ladder because we think it will heal us. We think obedience to the law will get us higher, 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 up into God's favor. We think that it will strengthen us in our walk with Jesus. We think it will bring about healing, and it doesn't. It was never functioned to do that. It was only meant to reveal the brokenness. And so the obvious question then is, well, if the law doesn't do the healing, what does? That brings us to point number 2 in your outline. God's second word that he speaks to us throughout the entire Bible. And that word is the gospel. The gospel. So the first word that God speaks to us is the law. Second word is the gospel. Now, can I play Captain Obvious for just a second? I promise this is not as condescending as it's about to sound. This is for rhetorical effect. Okay? Let me just play Captain Obvious for 1 second by asking you a question. What chapter in Exodus are we in today? What chapter are we in? 20. Oh, wait a second. 20? So, wait. This isn't chapter 1? You're telling me that chapters 1 through 19 came before chapter 20? Are you sure? Huh. So you're saying that all the miraculous redemption, all the beautiful promises, all the salvation, all the rescuing, all the bearing you up on eagle's wings came before the commands? Is that what you're telling me? Huh. Well, that's weird. What could that mean? It means the law is not a ladder for you to earn God's favor, for you to earn his blessings. You see, it means that God's favor only and always comes to you by grace, not by your obedience to the law. If that weren't the case, then chapter 20 would be chapter 1. God would have come straight to Moses in the burning bush and said, here you go. Give these to the people, tell them to obey them, and if they're pretty good at it, I'll put their deeds on a scale, and I'll weigh things. And if they do a pretty good job, then I'll rescue them. And then I'll bring them to myself. I'll bring them into the promised land. That is the way most Christians think about their spiritual lives. but that is not the actual Christian life. No. No, you see, the law is critically important. Critically important. But if that was the only word God ever spoke to us, we'd be in big trouble. I mean, what good is an x-ray without a treatment? What good is it? It would just leave us broken and depressed. Thankfully, God has more than an x-ray. He has a healing ointment to give us. And that healing ointment is the word of the gospel, the word of grace. This word is what heals us. In fact, he speaks it right here in our text today. Did you see it? Did you see it? You probably missed it. Most people miss it. But golly bum, it's right there. Let's look at it together. It's in verse 2. Verse 2. God spoke this to Israel. He said, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Before God gives Israel the word of law, you see, he reassures them with the word of grace. He says, I am your God, and you are my people, and I have already rescued you. I've already rescued you. You see, and this word comes completely apart from the law. Let's not mix them. It's separate because they have two separate functions. And the problem with the American church is they've done this. They've done what one scholar calls, they've preached the gospel, which is some muddled mixture of both law and grace. It makes no sense to the preacher and it makes no sense to those sitting in the pews. But it's what they preach because they don't know that God has two different words. They think God has one word. He doesn't. He has two separate words to give us. Law as an x-ray to show us our sin, and the word of grace as a balm of healing to cure us of our disease. The law, you see, folks, is not given to earn God's favor. They already have God's favor. Have you read chapters 1 through 19? They already clearly have God's favor. Incredibly, they have it. What have they done? If you've been with us for the last few weeks or few months, what have they done for the first 19 chapters? What has Israel done? Complained, whined, sinned, rebelled, blasphemed. That's all that they've done to Yahweh. And what has Yahweh done? In response, He loved them. He loved them. He rescued them. He brought them out of slavery. He brought them to Himself. He's leading them to the promised land. He is guiding them, teaching them, comforting them, shepherding them. They're sinning, and God is loving. They're rebelling, and God is forgiving. That's what's already been happening. In verses 1 through 19, if you're new with us, just go back and read it. If you don't believe me, 1 through 19, they already have God's favor. And so the Ten Commandments are not so that they can earn it, they already have it. That's the whole point of verse 2. See? That's the whole point. It's the word of grace that brings healing to our hearts. It's the word of forgiveness and acceptance and love by God that brings healing to our broken hearts. You see, my friends, God's love and acceptance of you is not riding on your ability to obey the Ten Commandments or any other command. It's not. When you utterly and completely fail in obedience, He is still your God and you are still His child. If you don't believe me, read Exodus chapters 1 through 20. It's going to get a lot more fun too, because Israel don't waste any time breaking these commandments. Like, it's coming quick, okay? So it's going to get even more fun, and God's grace is going to get even more scandalous as we go through Exodus. And so in closing, I want to show you something else I think is really amazing about the law. I think it's really amazing. So the law not only reveals our sin, but the law itself also reveals the solution. It reveals the healing balm The law itself. Now, how does it do that? I'll show you. So most of the time, when we think of Old Testament prophecies, what do we think of? We think of like Isaiah or Daniel or Ezekiel, right? But the New Testament says something really interesting. It says that the Ten Commandments also prophesy. Now, isn't that interesting? The Ten Commandments prophesy. Matthew 11:13 says, "For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John." What? How could the law prophesy? Not a prophecy. It's law. It's law. I thought you said it's just showing us our sin. Well, it does do that, for sure. It's one of its main functions, absolutely. It certainly does reveal your sin. You haven't kept your heart from idolatry. You haven't always properly used the name of God. You haven't kept the Sabbath holy. You haven't honored your parents. You haven't abstained from hate. You haven't been faithful in thought and action toward your spouse. You haven't always told the truth. And you haven't ceased coveting your neighbor's possessions. And I haven't either. None of us have kept the Ten Commandments. None of us. Oh, but my friends, there was one who did. There was one who did. There was one who only ever had Yahweh as his God. There was one who always rightly used the name of his God. There was one who perfectly kept the Sabbath holy. There was one who perfectly honored his parents. There was one who never once let hate enter his heart. There was one who was perfectly faithful in thought and action toward his bride. There was one who never said anything other than the truth. And there was one who never once coveted his neighbor's possessions. So, while the law does show us how unrighteous and unholy we are, at the same time, it shows us how completely righteous and holy the Messiah would be. The Messiah himself said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." Now that word fulfill is kind of weird there, isn't it? Isn't that kind of an interesting word for Jesus to use? I mean, the word fulfill is almost always used in reference to prophecies, right? Prophecies being fulfilled. But Jesus uses that word here to refer to the law. So what does he say? Christ is saying, I am the one to whom every command in the Old Testament is pointing toward. The Ten Commandments are a prophecy. Not of the character that you should have, but of the character of the Messiah. You'll have hate in your heart, but he won't. You won't honor your parents, but he will. Your heart is an idol factory. You won't keep your heart from idols, but he will. And in that way, the Old Testament Ten Commandments not only show us our sin, but it shows us the righteousness of our Savior. And so here's the next question I've heard many times. So if the commandments were pointing to Christ and he perfectly fulfilled them, does that mean they no longer have any significance? No, that's not what that means. That's why both the monument builders and the unhitchers are wrong. They're both wrong. See, the monument builders are wrong because God has two words to speak, not one. He has two words for us, not one. And so you can't erect a monument of the Ten Commandments without also erecting a monument of the gospel right next to it. You got to have both. So God has two words to say to us. He has both the law and the gospel. And that's how the monument builders are wrong. And the unhitchers are wrong, because if we don't have the law at all, then the radical grace and forgiveness that comes to us through Jesus' blood won't make much sense. The cross will seem bizarre and overkill. It's like, whoa, dude. Take it easy. Take it easy, Jesus. That's intense. It won't make much sense to us. You see, if we don't see the depths of our sin, then we won't see the towering heights of our Savior's love. See? You got to have the law. You got to have both. You got to have the law and the gospel of grace. And we've had several people over the last couple of years come to Gospel Life, and they're like shocked by this message of grace, and they kind of wrap their heads around it, and they'll say, I've heard several people say that, they'll say, I've just been so afraid of the Old Testament. I'm so afraid of it. Like, I'm afraid to read it. And frankly, some of them have said that they're afraid to read Jesus' words. Because, hey, Jesus preaches these two words too, right? You'll come across the red letters of your Bible, and you will come across like shocking grace. Like, wow, like overwhelming, towering mercy, right? But then you'll flip the page, and it will be harsh, difficult law. Like, pick up your cross and follow me, right? That's just one page over or one paragraph down, right? Do you see what Christ is doing? He's using these two words. And so this has always been my counsel to these people that have come to me, and this is my counsel to you right now. You have nothing to fear of the Bible's commands. Nothing. You have nothing to fear. I get it that they're harsh. Let them be harsh. I get it that they're difficult. Let them be difficult. That's the point. That's the point. The commands are not given so that you'll strive harder. They're given so that you'll stop striving altogether. At least where righteousness is concerned. God is using the law. Jesus is using it so you'll stop trying to earn your own righteousness. And that you will rest in His righteousness. You see? The harshness of the law is meant to lead you to the sweetness of the gospel. That's the purpose. So the law says do, the gospel says done. The law says guilty, the gospel says forgiven. The law says try harder, the gospel says it is finished. You see, it is true that the law requires perfect obedience. Perfect obedience. Leviticus, James, and Jesus make that abundantly clear. It's explicit from Jesus' mouth, from Leviticus, and from James. Perfect obedience is what is required. And you say, well, I can't do that. Yeah, no duh. Neither can I. That's the whole point. Christ has accomplished perfect obedience to the law on our behalf. Where we have failed, He succeeded. And now, all of His perfect righteousness is credited to our account. How? The Apostle Paul tells us again. He writes this in Philippians 3, verses 8 and 9. He says, that I may gain Christ and be found in Him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law. Let me read it again. That I may gain Christ and be found in Him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ. The righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. Now, I can't tell by the looks on your faces But that is really good news. Like, really, really, really good news. You are not counted righteous because of your obedience to the law. You're counted righteous because of your faith in Jesus' obedience to the law on your behalf. You don't believe me? Take it up with Paul. Take it up with Jesus himself. I'm just telling you what they said. Paul says, I have no righteousness of my own. I got nothing. I'm not midway up the ladder. I'm not 3/4 of the way up the ladder. I'm not at the top of the ladder. I haven't even made it up the first rung. And this is the person who wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. Not even the first rung of the ladder. He said, I don't have a righteousness of my own. Oh, but I do have a righteousness. A perfect righteousness. The righteousness of Jesus Christ himself that comes to me only through faith. That's good news.